Thank you for making Locked On Yankees your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. On today's episode, it's the Christmas Eve episode. And as you can see, Abby and I are joined by a special guest, and you'll find out who he is in a moment. But we're going to be talking about old Yankee stuff. Not old Yankee stuff, but Yankee stuff from the past and telling stories because it's Christmas Eve, and why not? All next, Locked On Yankees.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Yankees. I'm your co-host, Stacey Gotsoulias. I'm joined by Abby Mastracco. And Abby, tell everyone who is sitting next to you.
This is my dad. This is Vince Mastracco, the former host of Golf Talk with Vince Mastracco. So he has a lot more radio experience and talking experience than even I do. And we all know I like to talk. He hosted a golf radio show in the Sacramento area, Northern California, for almost 20 years. So we are getting him back into the glory days. We're going to talk about some of his glory days. He is an upstate New York native. We're here in Sacramento area, but he's from upstate New York, so he knows a little bit about some old-timey Yankees stuff.
Fun. This is going to be fun. And before we get into everything, let me remind you that you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else you find your podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube. Please subscribe. And when you get into your car, you can tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Yankees. I'm excited about this because I love talking about games from the past and games that I've been to. And, my dad's no longer around, but he was like a baseball encyclopedia and could tell you anything about everyone related to the Yankees. I told this story once, but I was writing an article about everyone in my family to see who was born in the year in which the Yankees won the World Series. Didn't tell him I was doing this. And I said, Dad, what year was Aunt Tina born? And he goes, 1939. Yankees won the World Series. So that's just how he was. So that's why I am the way I am. So I'm looking forward to this. Where upstate are you from?
I am from east of Albany along the Mohawk Valley, born in Little Falls, near Little Falls and Herkimer. And then we lived closer to Oneida Lake outside of Syracuse in a little small town called Camden. So age 0 to 5 in St. Johnsville, New York, and 5 to age 13 in Camden, New York. Okay. Then my family moved to Southern California and eventually migrated to Northern California.
I went to school in Oswego, so I'm familiar with Central New York and know people who lived in the Albany area who went to school with me, because people from all over New York went to Oswego because it was kind of central. So yeah, I'm familiar with that area. I'm glad you didn't stop being a Yankees fan.
Well, he does like the San Francisco Giants and even the Oakland A's from Northern, because he's been in Northern California for a long time.
Right.
But, the old teams die hard.
There's a little bit of my heart that has always, even while living here, still loved the Yankees. And of course, when I first got out of high school and then got out of college, I actually wanted to move back to New York. I wanted to become an advertising executive on Madison Avenue. Then I would be closer to the Yankees. However, by then they had been sold. Originally, when I started rooting for them, it was Del Webb and Dan Topping, and then they sold to CBS, who eventually sold to Steinbrenner.
Right.
And they got increasingly harder to cheer for because they were losing some of their folksiness, and especially the early Steinbrenner years, as he became known. George Steinbrenner became known as the boss.
Right. Yeah. In that article I wrote about family members being born during World Series years, I'm the only one in my immediate family that was not born in a World Series winning year. My dad was 41. My mom was 47. My brother was born in 78. And my claim to fame is the Yankees played in Shea Stadium in 1974.
Okay.
Do you remember the first game you went to?
Somewhere after the Mets, while visiting New York, when the Mets had I think it was in the early Tom Seaver years. So
Do you remember the first game you went to?
I do. I do. It was 1961. Of course, that's the year that Mantle and Maris were chasing each other for the home run record, of which Roger Maris eventually, um, you know, took and got asterisked for it. But
Mm.
my entire little league went to a Yankees game. We all had to wear our uniforms. So that way the chaperones could identify us, the volunteer parents. And we rode down, we gathered on a Saturday morning and drove to New York in a school bus. And so I was 10 years old. And I still have, I believe, most of the only two souvenirs that I could afford at the time. And our Little League uniforms, we only had one back pocket, and that's the only place we had to put our money. All day long, you walked around with your hand on your pocket because all the adults said, "Watch out for pickpockets." It's like, well, I only have one pocket. So the Yankees played the Detroit Tigers that day. And as much as we wanted Mantle and Maris to hit home runs, they did not. There were no Yankee home runs that day, but Rocky Colavito hit one for the Detroit Tigers.
Wow.
I don't remember who won. I remember the magnificence of the stadium. I remember how Yankee Stadium, no matter where you sat, sometimes where we were along the third baseline, out towards left field behind third base, there were pillars that were in our way, so we couldn't see everything. And no matter where you moved, you still had your vision obscured a little bit. And I remember that very thoroughly. I still remember, I was telling Abby, I believe pretty much most of the starting lineup that day. So for the Yankees, not the Tigers.
Well, before we get into how that lineup was built, Stacy, do you have what are we talking about when it comes to built these days?
We're talking about Built Bar because it's my favorite thing to talk about. It's the holiday season, so grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar or even better than a candy bar. Built Bar. It's filled with so much holiday goodness. It's rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat. High in protein. So you get the best of both worlds. Built Bar is delicious and healthy. And there's so many flavors you'll have a hard time choosing your favorite, although, as I say, every show, my favorite is mint brownie. I also really like coconut and cookies and cream. Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle the holiday shoppers. I'm hoping since it's Christmas Eve, you all got your shopping done and you won't have to do that. And let's see, you can tell Santa to throw Built Bars into your stockings. Again, there's so many flavors that everyone will be happy if they get a Built Bar. And Built Bar suggests that you dip one of your Built Bars into a piping hot cup of cocoa. Let it melt a bit and then give your beverage that little bit of Built Bar flavor. And yeah, I think I'm going to try that on Christmas morning. If you go to built.com, you can use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. And as I say all the time, once you order from Built Bar and they have your email address, they let you know about new flavors, new products. They give you chances to order stuff that might be not quite discontinued, but things that might go away soon. So again, go to built.com, use our promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Thanks again for making Locked On Yankees your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Now, speaking of this lineup, can you go through maybe some of the guys that were in that lineup?
Yes. On that day, Yogi Berra played left field. He was in the twilight of his career at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never forgotten when he would get ready for a pitch, instead of facing the infield, he faced the left field foul line. And I often thought did he only have this limited range of movement, or was it because Mickey Mantle, who played center field, could cover so much ground? But Berra in left field, Mantle in center field, Maris in right field. Catching was Elston Howard. First base was Moose Skowron. Second base, Bobby Richardson. Shortstop, I'm a little hazy on that one because I think Tony Kubek, who was the regular shortstop at that time, was injured, and I think a very young Tom Tresh started that day at shortstop. I sort of remember an announcement that way. And if you look back at the records, Tresh, like, he was only up for a cup of coffee. I think it was like 63 before he really stuck with the Yankees. But I think Tresh started at shortstop. Clete Boyer, who was really an all-time wonderful fielding third baseman at third base. Brooks Robinson got all the publicity in those days, but Clete Boyer was right there. Robinson maybe had a little more pop in his bat, but Clete Boyer on third base was awesome. I'm pretty sure Ralph Terry pitched that day. I don't remember the date. The Yankees had another pitcher that I think Art Ditmar was a pitcher in those days, but and I know that Luis Arroyo was their one big reliever, but I'm pretty sure Ralph Terry was the pitcher that day.
You were 10 years old, and you
know,
remember all of this from 10 years old.
When you live in upstate New York, that's Yankee country. And so everything in those days was Whitey and Mickey. And today I play golf off and on with a friend named Jimmy Ford, who was a distant cousin of Whitey Ford. And even he talks about when Whitey and Mickey would show up at places, and half the time they had already been to a bar around the corner before they showed up for an autograph session somewhere. Those days.
Yeah. I love that. So my dad grew up a Yankees fan. He went to his first game probably the late 40s. I think around 47, his mother allowed him to go because he didn't live that far from the stadium. He could walk there because he grew up in the Bronx. Wow. Yeah. And she would give him a brown paper bag with lunch packed in it, give him, I think, a nickel or a dime to go into the bleachers, and he would sit there. And his namesake, his uncle Gus, was actually a Giants fan, trying to convert him into a Giants fan, and he would take him to the Polo Grounds all the time because, again, the Polo Grounds was just a train ride from the Bronx into Manhattan, one stop, so it was easy for him to go. And he used to always like to tell me, he's like, yeah, my Uncle Gus was always trying to turn me into a Giants fan, but I would never not like the Yankees. I couldn't do that, but I would still go to Giants games with him just to make him happy. But I remember saying to my dad how cool it was thinking about all the different players that he saw and how I was jealous of that. And he said to me, Stace, you see Mariano Rivera, you see Derek Jeter, you're seeing all these guys. And if you have kids, which I don't, but if you have kids and they'll say the same thing to you, like, oh, you saw Derek Jeter and you saw Mariano Rivera and all those guys. And I just love the history of the Yankees and stories that everyone has about going to Yankee games. My dad took me to my first 2 games, took me to a doubleheader. Now, I don't know why he did this. Tell me why he did this, Vince, because you're a father. Took me and 3 of my guy friends from elementary school by himself to a single admission doubleheader.
That's brave. That's very brave.
Well, it was because of single admission. We got more baseball.
True.
And in those days, a baseball game would wrap up in under 3 hours, 2 hours and some time. So then a break and then the next game. And it was like you just felt like you had a full day of baseball instead of an ultra marathon long day of baseball.
Right, which is what it's like now. Oh, I wouldn't go to a single admission doubleheader now. It's too much. But I just remember, like you said, when you first go into the stadium as a kid, you see it on TV, but it's completely different when you go in for the first time. I was 3 weeks shy of my 9th birthday when my dad took me. And everything just the colors seemed brighter than they did on TV. Like the green of the grass was just almost fluorescent to me, and the blue of the walls, and the smell of everything, even the bad smells. It's just everything was so much, and I couldn't stop looking around. Like I try to pay attention to the games, but I remember sitting there and just looking around at everything and looking around at everyone and thinking to myself, I'm finally here. Because I remember being angry at my father for not taking me until I was almost 9, because he took my brother, who's nearly 4 years younger than me, to his first game earlier that same season. And it was the whole, he went because he's a boy and, you didn't take me because I was a girl. And then he made up for it by taking me to a doubleheader. That the Yankees swept.
A great equalizer, a doubleheader.
Yeah, the Yankees swept. Ron Guidry pitched a complete game in one of them. Don Mattingly, only just came up, and he played first in the first game and right field in the second game. And Dave Winfield played left field in the second game. And because we were in the first row of left field, he was talking to my dad right before the game was starting when they were warming up. And I was sitting there just staring, thinking to myself, my dad is talking to Dave Winfield. Like he's just a dude. It was so, my dad was like that though. He didn't care. He would talk to anyone and it wouldn't be a big deal. And I just sat there like, oh my goodness. I love it. I mean, it's how many years ago now? Almost 39 years ago. And
that was a different era of history too.
Yeah.
There's so much history within Yankee culture. So
my first game was at the Oakland Coliseum, and I don't remember who they even played. I just remember it was really hot. We were sitting on Mount Davis. They don't even let you sit up there anymore. Yeah. And the sun bounces off the ocean. This is not as nostalgic as Yankee Stadium. Why didn't you take me? Did we go to Candlestick games too? Did you maybe take me to Candlestick?
I don't recall if I ever took you to Candlestick.
Man, we really did not have great baseball stadiums in Northern California growing up. The one thing that I always remember though was that if he got baseball tickets or basketball tickets, because we often got Sacramento Kings tickets, he said, somebody would say, oh, I've got 2 tickets. Do you want to bring your son? He would say, I need a third for my daughter. Always. I was never left out of the sports excursions, except for one time when Ben got in a fight and you took him to a Raider game to teach him a lesson about fighting. And he never got in a fight again.
Well, yeah, I took him to a Raider game. I only had 2 tickets. And he got up one time to go to the restroom. And then he came back very quietly. And I said, well, how was that? With all of the Raider garb and the mask, and we weren't too far from the black hole. Coliseum. He said, I'm okay, but I think I'll just kind of stick with you.
And he never got in another fight again. My brother's 2 years younger than me, and he never got in another fight again.
Nice.
So that obviously worked. I do remember my first trip to Yankee Stadium, though. It was my first trip to New York City when I was 19. We went on a family trip. And we sat in the bleachers. Mm-hmm. You insisted on sitting in the bleachers.
And I wanted to go see the monuments, but then I didn't realize that from the bleachers we couldn't get into to do the monuments.
But I think it meant more for you to sit in the bleachers because you were telling me about the roll call, and I didn't know anything about this because I had been to games on the West Coast my whole life. And we were sitting in the bleachers doing the roll. My mom was not having it. She kept complaining, why are there no backs on the seats? She was not having it. And he was enthralled. They were playing the Texas Rangers. And towards the end of the game, it was a close game. And you sat there for 3 innings and you said, I'm just looking to see Mariano's going to warm up at some point. Mariano Rivera is going to warm. He was like 10 years old again. My mom is saying, no, I want to go. I'm hungry. I made us restaurant reservations.
Well, if you went to a Yankees game during that era, you wanted them to have to bring Mariano Rivera. And he was so dominant.
This was 2006.
He was just riveting. In his peak years, he was absolutely riveting. And so now we look back over his entire legacy, but it was like, well, I hope the Yankees screw something up because I want him to come in. I don't want this to be an easy game for the Yankees.
My mom said she wanted to go to Sylvie's, which is, it's an infamous New York restaurant. I've now been. I didn't go on that trip because my brother and I could see that our parents wanted to do 2 very different things. So we looked at each other and we were the adults in the room. And my brother said, okay, I'll take Mom. You stay here with Dad. And you turned to me at one point and you said, oh, he's coming in. He's coming in. Like a child. This was in 2006. I was 19 years old and he turns into a little kid and he says, Mariano Rivera's coming in, the best closer in all of baseball. And he's standing up with all the other bleacher creatures. And it's just something about Yankee Stadium transforms everyone into a kid again.
Oh, yeah.
It really does. There are some stadiums that have, baseball in general has the ability to kind of bring out the nostalgia in everybody, which is so great about it. So I don't know about that lineup back in 1961. Would you say that you would bet on them right now, Stacey? How about that? Would you bet on them right now?
I would actually. Yeah.
What else?
think
What are you betting on?
Well, wait, in
Vince?
61, didn't they lose the World Series? Wasn't that the year Bill Mazeroski took the World Series away from them, too?
that
I
was
can't remember, too. That's my, I am losing some of my memory of then.
What are you betting on these days, Vince?
What am I betting on? Bet Online has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the College Bowl season and the pro football playoffs. Bet Online remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. Bet Online, where the game starts.
We had to. This is a nostalgia episode. He was a radio host for 20 years. We
Can
had
you
to.
tell?
We had to let him. We had to let him go back into host mode.
definitely.
Around here, they used to call him the godfather of golf radio.
Now I have to ask, when was that trip in 2006 where you saw the Yankees play Texas? Do you remember the month?
It was August because it was brutally hot and
Okay.
humid.
Yeah.
So it was August. I do remember that.
Okay, because I was at the game in May 2006 when the Yankees found themselves down 9-0 to Texas in the second inning, and then they made a tremendous comeback. But what's funny about that, I had the Sunday plan for 15 years, so I mostly went to Sunday games. Exactly a week before that Texas game, I watched the Yankees and the Red Sox play, and the Red Sox won like 14-3. Then I go exactly a week later on a Tuesday, the Yankees are down 9-0 in the second inning. And I look at my brother and I said, I'm never coming here on a Tuesday again. And he said to me, Texas doesn't have great pitching. The Yankees can come back as long as they keep them at 9 or 10 and they don't let them get any higher than that, they can catch up. And that's basically what happened. The other funny part of that story is I've come to find out that I know at least 4 or 5 people that I didn't know at the time who were also at that game in 2006 against Texas, which is another fun thing about being a Yankee fan and meeting people online, meeting people through Twitter. I have a bunch of friends that I met on a message board probably 19 years ago now, and I'm still friends with them. And, we used to go to games together, and we have a Slack group that we all, we complain about the Yankees every 5 seconds in the Slack group. And I just like the bond that Yankee fans have together, and even just baseball fans. And as you were saying, it's a different thing when you go to a baseball stadium. You don't see someone going to a basketball arena and thinking, oh my God, I came here as a kid and it's so great to be here again. It's something about baseball that makes that happen,
It's true. And I mean, I work in hockey, so I'm in these dual sport arenas that are mostly built for concerts. That's a big revenue driver. So they are built for multiple uses. Baseball is built around the identity of that team.
Yep.
You stack the lineup with lefties. Well, in a good year, you stack the lineup with lefties at Yankee Stadium because you've got the short porch.
Right.
There's every baseball field has different dimensions, unlike a football field or a hockey rink or a basketball court. That's what makes baseball so unique.
Yeah. And I like that aspect of it. I mean, there are some stadiums that are annoying with some of their features that they have. Tropicana Field. But there are other stadiums that I don't mind, and I like the quirkiness. Sometimes Fenway annoys me with the pesky pole and the triangle in center because
we sat by the pole once it was after you went into remission for breast cancer.
Yes. Yeah.
We did a trip to the East Coast where we went to Cooperstown because upstate New York, so we visited with family. And then we went to Yankee Stadium, Citi Field, up to Fenway.
Nice.
Then we went down to Citizens Bank in Philly. And we didn't get to see Camden Yards. I've seen Camden Yards because I lived in Baltimore. We ended the trip in Washington, D.C., which I think was actually Tim Lincecum's last regular season
I believe
starts
it
for the
was.
Giants.
He got lit up.
He got shelled.
So
he got shelled.
he got lit.
So that was the Vince Kicked Cancer baseball tour, and we sat behind the pole in Fenway.
I have a quick Cooperstown story. If my first visit to Cooperstown, if you would want that.
Yes.
I was 13 by then, so now I was playing Babe Ruth League, and I think it was just our team that went to the Cooperstown Hall of Fame game, which was the Mets at that point managed by Casey Stengel, and the Washington Senators managed by Gil Hodges. So I had this one good friend named Mark, who was a big guy, and we were gathered around. They came up not to the Hall of Fame, but to the game site, to the stadium, in a bus. And so most of the Mets players, they were the first bus there, and they were getting off with carrying their gloves, their spikes, and their caps were off. So this one guy, a Mets third baseman at the time by the name of Charlie Smith, gets off wearing his cap. And my friend Mark behind me pushed on my shoulders and reached over and grabbed his cap and then took off running got away. And Charlie Smith was a pretty guy. I remember him just like, wow, that was fast. And he just smiled and laughed. So later on during the game, and it was pretty crowded, we wedged up, and there was a point where Casey Stengel got on the top step with some beach flippers yelling, "Let's go Mets, let's go Mets." But Charlie Smith was coming out into the on-deck circle, and we'd wedged our way up by the screen, and I yelled, "Hey, Charlie, you missed your hat?" And I pointed to my friend, and he just laughed. Well, then after the game, Gil Hodges was the manager of the Senators at that point in time, and we were at the Hall of Fame, actually in a restaurant like right next door, or a coffee shop or something. There was a parking lot. And so Hodges still had his uniform on, and he had his glove and his spikes, and he was shaking hands with somebody. And out of the blue, my friend Mark dashes up and grabs his hat and takes off running. And then Hodges goes, "Hey, come back here." And he takes his spikes and he throws them at him, and he chases him a little bit, and he takes his glove, and he never did catch him. But later on, somebody said, well, somebody else picked up his glove and cut between some parked cars. So not from our group, but so Hodges lost his glove and his cap at that.
Oh my goodness.
Spikes too, it sounds like.
I don't know if nobody cared about spikes as memorabilia in those days, and you certainly wouldn't have gone up and asked him to autograph them with anything. So I think he probably got his spikes back.
That's so great. I love that.
That was 1964.
Wow. I haven't been on a road trip. I've been to a few stadiums. Finally got to Camden Yards. I was supposed to go with my friends from my message board a long time ago, and I think someone passed away in my family, and I couldn't go the weekend that we had planned to go, and I finally went in 2015, and I love that place. I think it's great. It's
great.
It's so nice, and although I don't recommend going there at the end of July when it's humid and hot out, because I
recommend getting away from the Eastern Seaboard at the end of July and August.
Yeah.
As somebody who has lived on both coasts and in the Midwest, I recommend maybe coming out here. It's a lot drier of weather.
Yeah, it is brutal. But I met Boog Powell because he was sitting outside his barbecue place.
Barbecue joint,
yeah, that was cool. Because my friend's like, "You know who that is, right?" And I said, "No." And then when he told me, I said, "Get out." And I said, "Hi, I'm like, my first time here. Thank you for the pulled pork. It's great." But yeah, the other thing about Camden Yards is I liked Jason Giambi when he was on the Yankees. And I remember that he hit a ball out to Utah Street. And I kind of remembered where it was. And like I said, I'd never been to Camden Yards. And as soon as I got there, I went right to the spot and I looked, and I was within 3 feet of where the plaque was, where the ball landed. And my friend looked at me and he was like, "This happened in 2005. How do you remember that?" I don't know, but I did. And, it was cool seeing all the different ball plaques where guys had hit the ball onto Utah Street. And that was one of the last good stadiums built.
I'm trying to think of some of the newer ones. I'm still missing some of the American League parks. I think I'm missing like 5 American League parks. Um, when was that? Camden Yards was built in the 90s, right?
Yeah, 91. I think it's 30. I think it's turning 30. I think it
Turning
may have,
30.
I think the first season may have been 92. I got to remember that.
They've built some good ones since then. They built Petco in San Diego, and they
That's
built
true.
the park in San Francisco's beautiful. You got to go sit up top because you get the water view. I mean, there's not a bad view from that ballpark, but in San Francisco, I really love
Well,
that
maybe
park.
I should say the
You were there
last,
for the historic home run, and you went to get salami.
Oh,
I told that. I think I told that
Yes.
story last
actually,
week.
I was watching.
You did.
I watched Browns hit the home run.
You watched, but then
I
you
just wasn't back in my seat. So my friend that I was with thought that I had missed it, and
you went to go get more. I called you, and you said
yeah, no,
we're getting salami sandwiches.
yeah. Then I realized that Bonds was coming up, and so I cut back up, and so I just waited on the rail, and the ushers, everybody was watching Bonds at bat. So I watched Bonds hit the home run that broke Hank Aaron's all-time home run record, and then they had fireworks out in the bay going on. So I called Abby, and so that she could hear the fireworks and all of that.
No, I called you. I was in San Antonio,
Okay.
and you said, I'm going to get salami sandwiches. There's no line. Because it was Italian Heritage Night. And, Mastracco over here had to go get salami sandwiches. And
I was with another guy.
And yes,
that
he was with his best friend who was also very Italian. So
Yeah.
they saw what they needed to see, and then they got their sandwiches.
The interesting part of that to me was the tickets were given to me before the season started by a friend who had a business and would buy season tickets every year and use them as a promotional thing for clients. And so I don't even think he probably, to this day, I've never mentioned to him that I was the one who had the tickets that night.
Well,
and I'm sure he didn't remember.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. It worked out where I happened to have tickets to the last game that Cal Ripken Jr. played at Yankee Stadium in 01. And, everything was pushed back also because of 9/11, but it just so happened that it was on a Sunday and because of my Sunday plan. So I still have, there was a special ticket for it. There was a special, they gave us stuff because we were there for Cal Ripken Jr. Like they did a whole thing for Cal Ripken Jr., which I thought was cool of the Yankees.
Tour.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was cool. I was going to say, I'm a quarter Italian because my mom is Irish and Italian. And my dad was Greek. So my mom's mom, Angelina Miola McGuire, was her married name. She lived to be 104. She passed away in 2013, very close to turning 105. I had the idea that I was going to get her a 100th birthday card if I could find it, and a 5-year-old girl's birthday card because I know they don't sell 105th birthday cards, but she just missed it by like 5 months. But yeah, I had a lot of old great aunts, Italian great aunts, that we would do Christmas with my mom's family and Christmas Eve with the Greek side of the family. And we would also do regular Easter with the Italian Irish side and Greek Easter, obviously.
With the whole other thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun growing up with all that different culture, I guess. And yes, I have a temper because when I tell people that I'm Irish, Italian, and Greek, they're like,
you've got the mix.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, I do, which makes it fun being a Yankee fan sometimes.
Dad, who's your all-time favorite Yankee?
Well, my hero growing up was Mickey Mantle. And of course, now I realize that was maybe a little bit misplaced because of his heavy drinking, but we all liked the Mick. And that's, he even wrote one of his a book, The Mick. And so, and I like Yogi. I did like Whitey Ford as well. So, and I followed those guys a bit at the time, quite a bit. So, but we're overlooking one Giants game we went to. Yes, I saw Barry Bonds, but we also together saw a perfect game in San Francisco.
We saw Matt Cain.
You saw Matt Cain?
Yeah.
Perfect game against Houston.
Yeah.
We were in San Francisco together because I got Abby a media credential to help me cover.
No,
the US
I was
Open.
Covering it for the Orange County Register.
That's right. Okay, for the Register.
I was covering it for the Register.
So anyway, we were at the US Open at the Olympic Club, and Abby and this other reporter from Canada, Alfie, came up and said, "Hey, you're driving. We're buying your ticket. We want to go to a ball game tonight." So we went to the ball game, and during the game, early in the game, Alfie, this other reporter sitting next to me, said, I've never seen a no-hitter or anything like that before. And we said, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Well, three
And we
innings
watched the
in,
whole thing, yeah.
3 innings in, he's joking. He goes, still a perfect game. It's still intact, kind of joking. And this ended up being, my brother and I paid for, my brother had moved to Berkeley the day before, literally the day before. My brother drove to Berkeley, moved into a place sight unseen, was sleeping on the couch. And I said, take Bart into the city. This is our Father's Day present for Dad. And he said, oh, I don't have any money to buy the tickets. I said, it's fine, Ben. I bought the tickets. It's Dad's Father's Day gift because it was Father's Day weekend. And me and him had covered a couple of U.S. Opens together. And we would go to a baseball game for Father's Day week before the U.S. Open started. We went Pittsburgh, San Diego. Yes. And so then we were doing one at the Olympic Club, or we were doing the U.S. Open at the Olympic Club. So my brother and our friend, I'm still friends with him. He's a reporter up in Vancouver. And we all 4 of us went to this game, and it was like a debacle getting my brother there because my brother's not a baseball fan. And he couldn't figure out which statue to go to. Is he pitching or hitting? Well, does he have a bat in his hand, Ben? Well, I can't tell. And so then we finally get Ben inside AT&T Park. It's Oracle Park now, but it's AT&T. It'll always be AT&T to me. And we're all joking. Oh, perfect 3 innings in, perfect game still intact, right? And he goes, "What's a perfect game?" And you just looked at him and rolled your eyes.
Just my son.
So I had to tell my brother, no runs, no hits, no errors. And he goes, oh yeah, the guy's still throwing one. Well, Ben, we're 3 innings into it. And he says, well, what's a whole perfect, when he goes all 9 innings without any of that.
27 people out. 27 people out.
And then by the end of it, when Gregor Blanco made that amazing catch, even my brother got up and he was
yeah.
Like, I remember my brother getting up and putting his hands on his head and then cheering. And it was like, is Ben finally getting into baseball? No, that was the one game. Yeah. But he saw Matt Cain's perfect game, and that was...
So the non-baseball fan actually got to see a perfect game.
And that was your 2012 Father's Day present.
Yes, it was.
Very nice. Yeah, I got home from Oswego in 96, just mentally exhausted from finals week. And it was a Tuesday, and my dad said, "You want to go to the Yankee game tonight?" Because I hadn't been to one because I'd been up at school. And I said, "Can I tell you in a bit, like, how I'm feeling later?" He goes, "Yep." He's like, "I'm going to come home, and then, if you want to come, I'll drive you down." We ended up seeing Dwight Gooden's no-hitter that night.
Oh.
Yeah. May 14th, 1996. Okay. And I nearly didn't go. And then I thought to myself, let me just get to Yankee Stadium. I haven't been there all season. I want to see Derek Jeter in person. This will be awesome. Let's go. It was against Seattle. The Seattle of the 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the scariest lineups there is. And I mean, he walked like 6 guys and, it was scary. And every time a new guy came up, you were thinking, all right, he'll get a hit. He'll definitely get a hit. And it just didn't happen. And I will say the pop-up at the end felt like it was in the air for 25 minutes. It was the highest pop-up I'd ever seen in my life. And when they were carrying Gooden off, it took a while for my brain to process what was actually happening. I knew it was a no-hitter. We all, in the 6th inning, we were looking at the scoreboard. My dad said, "Do you notice what's happening?" And I looked and I said, "Uh-oh." So every time someone mentioned it, we were all crossing ourselves like, "Stop saying it. Shh, don't jinx it. Shh." And yeah, it felt like it was almost like an out-of-body experience. Even for me watching it in person, it was the strangest thing. But yeah, it was a game I nearly didn't go to, and I saw a no-hitter. Now, I did miss David Cohn's perfect game. I was supposed to be at that game, but I hurt my leg, and I didn't go. My brother's friend went my place, and it's 22 years later, and I'm so mad. I am so mad. Yeah. But there's nothing, like, you don't see stuff like that in basketball. Like, you'll see a guy, like, get 50 points or, like, you'll see Steph Curry break the 3-point record or something like that. But, the perfect game, no-hitter. I saw Randy Velarde do an unassisted triple play against the Yankees when he was on Oakland. I was hungover that day, too. And I saw it happen. And my brain wasn't right. And the guys behind me are like, "Do you realize what just happened?" I said, was that just a triple play? He said, yeah. I'm like, okay, I thought that's what it was. So I just feel like baseball is that sport where you see things like that. It's not the
There's something
same.
about baseball that when it's like at its best, at its purest, sometimes it almost feels like magic. And I work in other sports. I've worked in football. I saw Kobe Bryant's last game, and then I like the atmosphere there was one of the most electric atmospheres I've ever felt covering anything other than I think 2008 Tiger and Rocco's Monday round in that U.S. Open.
Mm.
But there's just something about baseball that it can transport you back to being 10 years old at your first game. You see rare feats that balls that end up in Cooperstown, spikes that end up in Cooperstown, somebody stealing a hat from Cooperstown. There's
Yeah.
times when baseball feels like magic more so than some other sports.
I think baseball is your friend because the season is so long. So it's your summertime friend, and it starts early in the springtime in February, right about the time everybody has started forgetting about their New Year's resolutions. And so, but you start seeing baseball, especially if you live in the Northeast or in snow country, you start seeing baseball on television news or now whatever media that you are perusing. But you'll see baseball players and they're all happy. And so the season inevitably starts happy and it creates an optimism. And then you're just there with it night after night, day after day for the balance of the summer and on into fall. And even though other sports like basketball and hockey have elongated their seasons, there's just something there that's not quite the same. We don't. I think we get in sync with baseball, whether we've played it or not. And I don't know that we, as a consuming public, truly get in sync with other sports as much.
Right.
It's comforting. My friends in LA would always say Vin Scully was the sound of their childhood because night after night they listen to Vin Scully. I mean, I've heard people in New York talk about the same thing when it comes to Susan Waldman. It almost feels like a relative. You're so comfortable and at ease when you hear that person on the radio talking about your favorite team and the sort of cadence and the pacing night after night of baseball, and the outs fall and you just sort of get into a nice little yearly rhythm, and you see in spring training, you see the sun shining and you think, oh, it's finally around the corner. It's really not. In the Northeast, it's around like 4 more corners, but
Golf can't accomplish that because golf has this attraction because from many years of covering golf, where it's the only sport where we can go into the arena where the tour players play. So we can go
play the same golf
a
courses.
U.S. Open course. We can go play Pebble Beach. We can go play Pinehurst and feel that. But it's still not the same. It doesn't grab you the same way. It's even when you're on a golf course, you might be talking baseball scores. It's just the way it is.
Yep.
So,
I love that. We're going to end on that note. Vince, thank you so much for doing this. This was fun.
thank you for having me. This is always fun for me. I miss my radio days. I miss the microphone. But when I get to do these things, it's always a joy. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So that's it for this episode of Locked On Yankees, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Abby, Vince, and I would like to remind you that you can listen to this show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can watch and subscribe to us on YouTube, and when you get into your car, you can tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Bets. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. One more thing, if you could be so kind, please rate the podcast and spread the word about this podcast to your fellow Yankee fans. We would really appreciate it. Happy Christmas. I'm suddenly British. Merry Christmas. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you next week.